almost human.
Hello, and welcome to the Warp Shelf. I'm Frank Duran.
I'm Deshaun Vasquez.
And today we raise the question, am I real or is this all CGI? No, we're really talking about Uncanny Valley. This is something that in film and video games is now becoming problematic slash is a thing people run into.
Well, CGI in general has become such a prevalent thing just in any form of entertainment as such a norm or a tool to use that it tends to come up a little more often.
So, for the uninitiated, what would you describe the Uncanny Valley as?
It's sort of the phenomenon that occurs when a CGI model or tool is used to try and replicate human features. And there's like a sense of unease or revulsion towards it because it can either look too human or not human enough. It's like a real tightrope between
what's funny is that it's a natural response.
Yeah.
Is that like it's literally a trigger in your brain to know if something else is human, because which is really funny that it's just like this natural like, oh, is this thing human? It looks human, and then if it doesn't look human, you're inside your brain there's just like this pang of like, oh, that's not fucking real, that's weird, you know, like and it's actually like a proven like reaction that happens. So there's we'll definitely go through some games, some movies, because this happens all over, and it's definitely, we're gonna go over some of the best cases, some of the worst, some of the ones that just make you go, well, they just missed that mark pretty fucking bad, didn't they? This could go into a talk of bad CGI, but we're mainly just talking about like when they try to replicate the human face and they either fail or they get really creepily close or they get almost invisible, because that's what we're going for here. Like,
yeah, that's sort of the tightrope with the whole entire practice is that it's this really hard balance of just like, if you go too far in either direction, then people spot it.
Yeah, and they're just like, that's weird. Like, I don't like it. No, now, there's some of my favorite films use this, and sometimes to good effect, and sometimes to, you're just like, oh no. But we'll first talk about some bad ones, because that's fun. That's more fun. So number one, because we'll just go into one of the main culprits right off the back is Marvel movies. Marvel movies are some of most of these movies rely heavy on CGI, but not just CGI, human facial complete reconstruction on screen.
Yeah.
And we're talking many different ways here. We're talking Ang Lee's Hulk, which is okay, we'll go a little bit deeper into that, but we come from Ang Lee's Hulk to like, oh, we have younger. Google, stop! Hey Google, stop! Hey Google, stop! Wow, stepping in on our podcast. Unplug that bitch right now. She's like, sorry, master. But we're talking about Ang Lee's Hulk to the making younger Robert Downey Jr. in the Civil War.
Even before that, you had stuff like Kurt Russell in Guardians 2.
Yep.
You had the young Michael Douglas in Ant-Man.
Yeah, it's wild. They practice. The funny thing is, Marvel movies practice things in earlier movies and then use them later. Well,
back from that, even non-Marvel stuff like Tron Legacy trying to de-age Jeff Bridges, but you even have the brief scene in X-Men 3 where they tried to like de-age Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen.
Yes, and
I think that might have been like the first time I ever like noticed it.
Yeah, where you're like, wait,
what is that?
What is that? I mean, if you're talking the Ang Lee Hulk, it's funny because they try to make it a really human face, you know, like it's Hulkish, but they're like, no, but it's still him underneath, you know, like, and it just comes across weird. It comes across veiny and like weirdly cut in his face. You're kind of like, oh, that's that's strange.
It's one of those cases where I feel like the technology just wasn't ready.
No, it was not.
Yet, because they're definitely like trying to make it as expressive as possible, but you look back on it, especially now, because what was that? That came out 2003. And it's just odd, especially when you get into like real awkward close-ups where you get like the grimace and stuff.
Yeah.
Just like, the shade of green is too unnatural. It just sticks out.
It just sticks out.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because they evolve Hulk almost every time Hulk comes on screen. They change it up. But I think Ang Lee and the Incredible Hulk with Edward Norton are the reasons why we don't get solo Hulk movies now, is that they realize that this is a CGI heavy movie.
Yeah.
Like, even if you had a shit ton of Bruce Banner, you have to have Hulk moments,
The
like
thing is that Hulk in the Incredible Hulk looks pretty good even by today. Of course, it doesn't measure up to like Mark Ruffalo on.
But it's funny because they go a little cartoonish. They go, hey, that was weird, Ang Lee. Like, let's just go more comic booky.
Yeah, and it's even to the point where like Hulk in the Incredible looks nothing like Edward Norton's Bruce Banner.
Where you're like,
which was a balance that they later tried to strike once we got to the Avengers. You're just like, no, this looks like Mark Ruffalo still.
And then it goes even further because then you get into Endgame and it's really they get so good at making Hulk and Ruffalo look the same, like when they transform, it's so well done because it's still his face, like, and it still feels like a mocap sequence, but like that it still looks like the Hulk you want, like it doesn't look weirdly like you're like, what the fuck is wrong with his face? Like, and I feel like they're flexing on people when they do the him stuck as Hulk and he's talking just like a normal human being. I feel like
Professor Hulk.
Yeah, Professor Hulk. I feel like they're just flexing on people there because they're like, oh yeah, we had problems about this before, but we pretty much got this figured because look, it's still Mark Ruffalo on screen. Like, boom, done. Like this is it. They're like, we got it over with. Like, but then you have you have a lot of really bad villains done badly in the Marvel movies. I feel like we have a lot of CGI heavy villains, and that leads to some weird things. And I feel like Spider-Man's one of the main culprits of that. They try to put people's faces on the CGI characters, and it just comes off as, whoa, why?
Like what?
Like you would Sandman in both of them, and then Electro in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Just, I don't like Jamie Foxx's weird blue face.
That's
and
mostly,
I know that's mostly makeup.
That's mostly makeup, but then you have like the CGI eyes, and then of course battle scenes. You're dealing with mostly a completely CGI model. And I get what they were trying to go with. They were trying to like emulate more Ultimate Spider-Man Electro. But the way it's actually executed is just so odd.
Yeah, it makes it forgettable. Like I really liked the first Amazing Spider-Man, but Amazing Spider-Man 2 made me be like, oh, what the fuck were you guys up to here?
And that's even a conversation to be had in the Amazing Spider-Man 1 with how they emulated the Lizard.
Yes, exactly. They're able to accomplish the right look, like, and still be cartoonish, still look like the Lizard should, that's why I love that movie. Is I'm a big Lizard fan. I know nobody is, but I'm a big fan of his. I love the tragic story of it. That's why I love Spider-Gwen. Everyone loves Spider-Gwen, but like
just that tragedy of like that version of Peter Parker
being the lizard. Yeah, I love that because the Lizard is such a tragic story, and to make it so personal makes it great. I love that shit.
But cartoony is an interesting like descriptor to use because sometimes it can be used to your advantage. Because if we're looking at the way like motion capture technology was pioneered, you go back to like Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
And if you look at Gollum,
which is one of the legendary examples. If we were we were saying some terrible things, but I'm saying like the milestone is pretty much anything Andy Serkis does, more or less. But
that's where it started.
Yes.
And the thing about Gollum is that that's sort of the right balance, which is interesting because Gollum is very cartoony in a way.
But it's very the facial movements are natural. That's why I think it works. Is that
it has the philosophy of like an animated character as opposed to trying to realize something too realistic.
Yeah, which is why I think it's important to when you compare that to is it the two Planet of the Apes movies that he is in, because they're doing
he's in all three.
Yeah, he's in all three, but the last two because they are going for super realistic on the monkeys, and they're still able to accomplish to get to his performance.
It also helps that they, for the most part, based on the way the actor looks, don't try to go too far hyper realistic. Because they still very much are like humanistic. Yes. And they can still express. It's not going too far. It's not
I know why you're saying this. Oh, what movie could you obviously be referencing to, Sean? Is it Lion King?
Yeah, it's that, you know that indie film, The Lion King, that came out last year?
One that had, those small artists, Beyonce and Childish Gambino.
Yeah, kind of a small movie. You might have missed it.
Tiny indie film. Yeah. Because obviously he's talking about that. That is one of the biggest culprits that had to come up today, because that is the ultimate misuse of the Uncanny Valley, where that's
the example of going like too far on that side of the spectrum of just like trying to make it look too realistic,
exactly,
to the point where it becomes a
restrictive. And that's the thing. That's the main problem with the Lion King movie is Lion King, the original animated film, is a very cartoony, fun, kinetic film. Everything moves, everything sings, dances, steps on each other. Everything is action. Everything is movement. When they flip over logs to look at bugs, all the bugs move everywhere. It's a movie that moves. And then you go into the remake or whatever you want to call this.
Call it a remake.
Would you call this a remake?
Because if you call it the live action film, you always have like the bananas. Well, it's not live action.
Technically, only the first shot of the film is live action.
It's not live action. It's just like it's another animated movie. It's just CGI this time. Just like yes, but you know what we mean.
Yeah, you know what we mean. And it's really funny because they find themselves boxed in. They go too far into a realistic animal. These do, like, you give credit to this movie. Those animals look real. You're like, holy smokes, like, that's a fucking lion that's talking, you're like, holy shit.
But you know what the problem with that is that animals can't express.
Yes, you're like, you know why this is weird? Because animals don't talk in real life.
Which is weird because like Jon Favreau also directed The Jungle Book, and that struck a balance.
Yes, it goes a little cartoony. It goes a little exaggerated, and it uses it for its strength. Like it's able to give everybody their expressiveness, and that's what Lion King just falls on its face about.
It's just one of those things where it felt like Favreau had almost like learned the wrong lessons from The Jungle Book and just got really obsessed with the technology. And the technology in and of itself is really impressive, cool, but it does not service the film in any meaningful way.
No, because I think you have to bring the key culprit of I Just Can't Wait to Be King is a really fun scene in the original film. In the remake, it is so forgettable and disappointing. You're just kind of like, oh, so you can't do all this stacking on each other and the fun, like, animals fucking around, so you just decided they all run instead? That's what we decided?
That's the, there's sort of a sinister part of me that is, like, happy the reception to The Lion King was what it was, because it gives the general public...
everybody's surprised Deshaun has a sinister side.
But it just gives the general public the idea of just like, yes, there are advantages to different mediums, and there's stuff that you can do in animation that people will accept because it's an advantage of that particular medium that doesn't work when you try to emulate it in live action.
Exactly. And I just think that it's kind of sad because this is a good cast. This is the only person I really had a problem with was Seth Rogen as Pumbaa, because it's so obvious, and then they change stupid lines to be like, hey, we're different now, and you're just like, you made it not funny, you fucks.
That was like one of the When they announced the cast, that was the immediate one. I'm just like, oh, fucking course they put Seth Rogen as Pumbaa.
I mean, I think there's so much good casting here. I think Beyonce is a fantastic Nala. She sounds like Nala, and so does Childish Gambino. Childish Gambino is a fantastic
Donald Glover.
Okay, yes, I know. I am a huge Childish Gambino fan. I have all of his stuff on vinyl. That's why I love him. I know it's Donald Glover, but I'm a huge fan of Childish. But he's fantastic in the role. So that's why it makes that beginning where it's not Donald Glover and it's not Beyonce, and the animation is stiff and everything is just kind of like, oh, we're directly stealing scenes from the other movie and it's just not playing, that you're just like, meh. And it's funny because obviously they haven't learned their lesson. They've greenlit so many other films.
What other animal-centric films that we got?
They're like,
I know they said that they're trying to get Robin Hood.
They are thinking about Robin Hood. So that's the weird one. That one, you can't do realistic animals because there's no realistic animals.
Yeah, they're all anthropomorphic.
So what are we gonna do? Zootopia, but super realistic? Like, what the fuck is gonna happen here?
Gonna be like
a furry daydream is what it's going to be.
It's going to be like the original. Scary. It's going to be like the unaltered version of Sonic that we were going to get before they changed it. It's just going to be like nightmare fuel. Everyone's got weird teeth. Oh my god, not the teeth. But really though, that movie could go really badly because they didn't learn anything and they did Lady and the Tramp. They were just like, but look, real dogs. And then they're like, oh wait, this is like weirdly Air Bud. Like they're like, oh, this is bad. You know, like the bits and pieces I've seen of Lady and the Tramp, because I don't give a fuck about Lady and the Tramp, of like the remake. I've seen the original, but I mean like the remake. It wasn't one of the ones I'm like, oh man, they're remaking the
yeah, right. Oh man, can't wait to see Lady and the Tramp remake. That's why they were like, we're gonna put it on Disney Plus.
Yeah. But what little I've seen of it, like it looks pretty good in places. It is a lot of like real animals that we filmed, and we sure use CGI to make their mouth flap. Yeah, you're like, oh. And sometimes you're like,
but what's funny about that is that's classic Disney. They've had a lot of movies where animals talk, and they've tried tons of different methods.
And we're actually at the point where you can feasibly make it look good.
Yeah.
And there are points for clips I've seen in the Lady and the Tramp remake where I'm like, that's actually pretty good, and that might be a better idea than just making them entirely CG.
Yeah, true. I agree. There's some advantages to every one of these as they figure out things, you know, like
that also works better for something like Lady and the Tramp, which is a lot more low scale and just about like dogs who love each other, as opposed to like the Shakespearean epic that is the Lion King. Lion King's trying to like bite off a little more, you know what I mean?
No. And that's the problem, is that they brought a pop essence to basically Hamlet, you know? Like you know that's weird, guys, you know? Like that's super strange. Mm-hmm. Like you know, at least and that's the thing, is the original film's able to hold the tone. Like fun, light, but obviously we're dealing with some serious shit here. The remake is just like, we got Beyonce, what? And that's kind of the entire tone of the movie, you know. Like, and that's there's many different problems with that, but like, and Disney just is a great example because they keep going, and going. They keep pushing it. I mean, we tried to start with the Marvel movies, but obviously it bleeds off. I think one of my favorite early examples of this was you said Tron Legacy. I at first I loved that. I was like, wow. They did it. They made him young again. Like, so cool. And then later on when I go back, I'm like, whoo, that's weird looking.
It stuck out to me even back then. Even when I first went to go see Tron Legacy, I'm just like, that's, it was just one of those things where it immediately stuck out to me. Just like, you know, that's ambitious, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, let's keep going with de-aging, because it's a common thread now, is that these movies want nostalgia, so they bring it back the actual actors and they try to de-age them and put them on screen. And Disney's the main people trying to do this all the time.
And like sometimes And it varies, even with the Marvel movies.
Yeah.
I point to, like, Ant-Man versus Ant-Man and the Wasp, because I still think, like, Kurt Russell de-aged in Guardians 2, and Michael Douglas de-aged in the first Ant-Man had been the best two examples. Like, they look very good.
They look pretty darn good.
And they're not on screen long enough for you to, like, pick out the flaws.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the perfect thing. You go to Ant-Man and the Wasp, where they de-age Michael Douglas again, and they do Michelle Pfeiffer, and it doesn't look as good.
No, it doesn't. And then you have to bring up Disney's Star Wars movies, because they've been de-aging people all over. So we have
We're going to talk about the Tarkin in the room.
Yes, I was like, we're going to touch the Tarkin in the room. So we have obviously Rogue One is the main culprit. So and then we have Rise of Skywalker, who also tries to do a couple de-aging things. And actually succeeds. I would say Rise of Skywalker.
Bringing it back to Rogue One, here's
bring
my
it back
thing.
to Rogue One.
Tarkin, for me, looked very good, but he was on screen way too long.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that that Uncanny Valley-wise, Tarkin is really well done. You know, like, and if he was on screen less or covered in shadow somehow,
that would be how he's introduced at first too.
Yeah,
when you open on him, he's like, you see the reflection of him in the window until he like turns around. And you're still just like, this is looking good, but if you let him sit there for too long, I'm going to be able to pick
you're
out
going to be
faults.
like, that's wrong, that's wrong.
Armor. And that's exactly what happens, because Tarkin is in that film a lot longer than you would think.
Which is, for me, I love it.
Yeah.
There's reasons why Rogue One, for me, stands out as one of the greatest Star Wars films, is because of these reaches at being like, hey, these are great characters, and we kind of shafted them, you know, like... And they give them that moment, you know, to shine. Like,
and then the interesting thing is that we also have Leia at the end of that, who looks super awkward to me.
And that's a moment where if they kept it, if she was on screen for maybe like 5 seconds left, I would have bought it. Like, because they turn the camera, and I'm like, I'm buying it, and then they get in the front and they stay, and you're kind of like, oh no, we should not stay. We should not be staying.
And
like,
then we get Leia again with the flashback in Rise of Skywalker, and it does look better than it did in Rogue One,
Far
but
better.
It still sticks out to me.
It's still weird
because
Luke looks so good.
That's pretty seamless.
That's the crazy part, is Luke, when you look at him, you're like, did they cast what's his name?
Sebastian Stan.
Sebastian Stan. I was like, did they cast Sebastian Stan for that recreation? Because, like, obviously that's what you're supposed to do.
But I think that's also the advantage of, like, he's in the position, he's laying on his back, he's also shrouded in a little shadow. So that one surprised me.
And it's just like the classic Iron Man, just the face.
Whereas, you know, like Leia, the camera's moving closer to her face, she pulls off the mask, and she's pretty well lit by the lightsaber.
So what's the weird thing about that is that they use Leia's
Carrie
Fisher's actual daughter. So, like, it's even if there wasn't CGI there, it would be close. And that's why I almost go, why did we go so far? You know, like, because they could have done like little tweaks to the face, and I think it would have worked. I would have been like, Leia, a little older. You know, like a little bit older, because she's training with Luke now, you know, like, but instead they're like, nope, full redo the face, basically. And I just think it doesn't work as well as it should, you know, like, and then you also, doesn't Rogue One have another de-aging, or am I forgetting?
No, it's really just Tarkin and, Leia.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't forgetting any crazy shit. And, I mean, there's a lot of, Disney's just full of it, because, like, you go into Pirates of the Caribbean, where they just start going crazy with some of this.
That one's an odd one, because they actually used, in the same way that they did for Kurt Russell and Michael Douglas, they actually tried to go back to older movies or TV shows with them to use as reference models, and it worked out great for Douglas and Russell, but Johnny Depp just doesn't look like Johnny Depp.
No.
They de-aged him. No. Even though they were, like, using the right reference material for it. And I remember what young Johnny Depp looks like.
You're like, everyone remembers him. Everyone's seen Edward Scissorhands. We all know what he looks like. You know, like, he's been in movies for a very long time.
I remember Nightmare on Elm Street. Little baby Johnny Depp.
Little baby Johnny Depp. Who's another culprit of de-aging? We have Well, we have The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which is kind of an opposite of de-aging, but like they make Brad Pitt older and older and a weird. I think that movie's a great example of they do some things right and some things wrong, where they're like,
so kind of like The Irishman.
Yes, yeah. I was like, that was the next thing I was gonna go to. I was trying to keep The Irishman off a little bit, but it's coming, of course. Now you got me distracted with The Irishman. The Irishman, the de-aging in that is just so...
it's peaks and valleys. It, like, really varies. Here's the thing about The Irishman, is that it's actually almost seamless in certain, like, time periods when they do it. And, like, they actually de-age them. And, like, oh, wow, they actually look older in real life than they do here, and I never noticed.
Yeah, right.
But most of the time, I think it's just a sense of, like, motion. I think early on were like the earliest time in history where they give Robert De Niro like these neon blue eyes. And you're just like, and then even that, like I always point to like the big wide shot where he beats up the store clerk.
Yeah,
that's like, he's supposed to be like this relatively young man, like maybe in his 30s, and he's moving around like this old senior citizen trying to beat up, and it looks about as awkward as like the Sonny fight in The Godfather.
Yeah, right. You're
where
just
it's like super
what?
telegraphed, and those punches, those are not connecting. And he's like all stiff and like, I'm gonna get you. Shit. Well, I pulled my hammy.
I'm going down. Yeah, that's one of. It's like The Irishman is a great film, and I feel like they're doing such a good job with what they had, but also they are dealing with a cast of older men trying to be young. And
it's also a case of like Scorsese being like, I'm not putting dots on my actor's face.
Yeah,
You're just gonna do it.
You're just gonna
from scratch. And maybe they would have benefited from like actual trackers on their face, or some like mocap suits. It does make their job a little easier as opposed to just working with like, here's the film. Do your magic.
Do the magic. Do the ting.
And it is impressive that we can even do that at all. But
yeah. I think we also haven't talked about one of the kings of de-aging. The Terminator. Welcome, I'm back, baby. Because he has... How many times have they de-aged Arnold fucking Schwarzenegger?
So, in Terminator Salvation, it was a body double with the head replacement.
Yep.
It looked pretty good for the time. Sticks out like a sore thumb now.
Yes.
Like, it was like, I kind of narrowed my eyes at it when I saw Salvation. I'm just like, you're almost there. You get to Genesis, also pretty good, but not quite there.
It's weird. It feels like they put a mask on somebody, but with digital. And that's the weird part to me there.
And they also sort of made their job harder because in Genesis there's a whole fight where it's like older Arnold versus younger Arnold from Terminator 1, which is actually kind of a cool scene. That's like one of the really cool parts of Genesis, other than it being trash.
Trash.
But then they even do it again in Dark Fate, and not only do they de-age Arnold in that, but they also de-age Sarah Connor and John Connor. And that's a good point to come up because that's one of the more seamless ones I've seen.
Yeah. But you can't talk about Terminator without talking about the first Terminator, where they're using like Stan Winston life casts of fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's beautiful. It's perfect. Like
that scene in the mirror where he takes out his eye does stick out a little more.
No, okay, but I'm not even talking the first one. I'm not talking the second one. I'm talking the first one. They use that life cast a couple times, and it's flawless. It's one of those things where you're just like, I didn't even know it wasn't the Arnold, and that just gives to Stan Winston. It's Stan Winston's. Everybody pray to the Stan Winston. It's like, if there's anybody we all respect in filmmaking, and everybody should, is Stan fucking Winston, because that man can make the best effects out of everybody, and they're all real, like...
I know you haven't seen Terminator Dark Fate, and neither have I in its entirety, because I kind of just rage quit after the prologue.
I don't need that kind of negativity in my life,
I kind of just rage quit, like, after the opening scene. I was just like, nope! But that opening scene does have some impressive technology.
Yeah?
Because the way they actually de-age Lyndall Hamilton does stick out a little bit because it's not quite there. But the most impressive part is actually the way John looks in that film.
Yeah?
Like, that, like, freaked me out for a sec. Because I'm like,
You were like, what the fuck?
I was like, did they superimpose, like, archive footage or something? Because that just looks like straight up new footage of young Edward Furlong. And just like, no, it was like completely CGI from the ground up, especially the face. I'm like, what the fuck? Because even Arnold, as good as he looks, still sticks out, and I can tell is CG.
Yeah.
The Edward Furlong bit, and he's not on for screen for long because they shoot him in the fucking face, is like caught me off guard.
Yeah,
I'm
you were like, whoa. That's weird.
That was like a literal just like, are we back in 19... When did T2 come out? 92?
And you got to talk about Terminator game appearances because there's obviously a couple There's a couple Arnold Schwarzenegger game appearances where some are okay. Like Mortal Kombat 11 just came out with theirs, and
and Dutch is also in the new Predator game.
Yeah. And I like the model. I think it's close, but the actor they got to voice him is weird.
It sounds like someone doing an Arnold impression.
Yes, and I could do a better one. Get to the chopper. Like, you know.
It's weird that Mortal Kombat 11, being a AAA game, wasn't able to get Arnold
Which is
back.
weird because they got
him for Dutch in the Predator game.
And they got RoboCop back. They got
Peter Weller.
Like, if you can get that big name, what the fuck?
And that's a good segue into video games in general, because this has been a thing prevalent in that particular industry for a long time, especially if we're talking like licensed games.
Oh, yes.
We had the whole episode about licensed games. So you look at something back like GoldenEye, where they would literally take pictures or promotional photos of the actors and sort of like
smush them to the model. That's why I love GoldenEye's graphics, is because they were just like, okay, we made the model of the character. How do we do this? Copy, paste, done. All right, we're good. Sean Bean looks amazing.
That looks just like him.
and it's so ridiculous. Okay, but before we go to video games, we got to talk about one of your favorite movies, and one of the best de-agings that they do is Terminator. It's not Terminator. Blade Runner 2049.
Yes, that is definitely like one of the better ones.
It's wild.
It's the scene with Rachel, because that was fun watching with you, because I could see you. It's like that meme of like that woman with like the math formula and stuff. You remember that meme where it's like the blonde woman darting her eyes and she's like doing math like Sherlock style? Like, that was you during that scene, because I could see you trying to like pick apart. I'm like, okay, what is this? Is this a body double? Did they get a lookalike? How much of this is CG? How much of this is makeup? Is that actually Sean Young doing it? I could see you trying to do the math in the head, because it was pretty perfect.
So fucking good. It's I remember watching it with you because I was so like, whoa, because that's amazing. Like, that is so good, you know? Like, that movie's full of great effects anyways, but that alone, you're just like, holy shit, that's one of the best de-aging I've ever seen. Like, it seemed like they got the same actor. They were like, here, I Rick and Morty portaled and I brought her back. Here we go. Put her on screen. Like, you know, like, and you're just like, holy shit, you know? And when you have to look at Tron Legacy, where you're like, oh, they pasted his face on a little bit there. And then you look at that, you're like, holy shit. And they start off again with her in dark, and then she comes out and you're like, frick. What the fuck? You're just like, holy shit. Okay, but back to video games. Sorry, I just had to bring up one of your favorites.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one to bring up, because it's like almost...
And it won an Oscar for it. I think it won Best First Visual Effects.
And it's definitely one to bring up. And that's an interesting combination, because that is one where, if I remember correctly, they did have Sean Young come back for it. There was de-aging used. And there was also a body double and a voice double, because Sean Young's like voice is just way more hoarse now, so it wouldn't have fit. So they also found like a pretty good voice double to sound like young Sean Young. Say that 5 to young Sean Young.
Sean Young.
To do
Crazy.
it. And sometimes it is a combination. Like, I think to the scene in Winter Soldier with like old Peggy Carter, where it was Haley Atwell sitting in a bed, but she had like makeup on And they used an old woman body double, and what they did was they kind of combined the two, like superimposed the two into one, and it's pretty good. The only thing that kind of sticks out in that scene is like the lips.
Yes, I remember.
And that tends to be the biggest problem is like eyes and lips.
Yeah, because and it's the same thing before we move away from this, because it's an important thing to bring up with today's technology. You have to talk about deep fakes.
Yeah.
And it's basically what we've been talking about. You're able to use AI to track another face onto a face to make pretty much people either be completely replaced in a role, make things say things they wouldn't say. So it's a little bit of a scary concept. You know, you could put out everyone was always like, you could put out this video of Obama and look, he's saying the lyrics.
Jordan Peele one.
Yeah.
That one was kind of scary.
That one's weird.
It's one of those things where like, yeah, I can mostly pick that out because I'm savvy like that. I've seen way too many movies.
But the average viewer,
and it's one of those things where like this technology is in its infancy. What happens when it starts to become more seamless?
Yeah, really seamless. And that's the thing, is it's kind of public domain too. This AI program is accessible and you can use it. And of course, first things first, porn was like, can I put Emma Watson's face on this porn actress? Done. And you're just like, whoa. I think this, and that's where it gets weird, is that where does consent come in?
Yeah.
You know, like where does your likeness is your own thing, and you can tell people not to do that.
That was something I thought of, and I remember being brought up when Rogue One was coming out.
Because she's gone. You know? Like, and you're just like, oh.
Yeah, Peter Cushing had been gone for decades at that point.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where like, how do you go about this? Did you guys like get permission from like his
estate
or something, or do you just kind of own the likeness anyway because Tarkin's a Star Wars character in general, and you earn like the merchandising
and
rights?
I think that's how it works, is that Disney owns the right to Star Wars and the characters in it, and Tarkin's a character.
There was something to the conversation of just like, if we're going to be going in this direction of like bringing back iconic characters for like actors who have long since passed away,
and then you have to bring up the James Dean film where they're literally just not going to cast somebody else as James Dean. They're just going to be like, CGI James Dean, he's playing himself. You're just like, wait.
Like that old Johnny Walker commercial with Bruce Lee.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. You're just like, you're just like, this doesn't seem okay. This doesn't seem okay.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up deep fakes. You know Corridor Crew, the YouTube channel, right?
Oh yes,
the guys who do, like, the reaction videos,
which
like,
I like them a lot. Yeah,
they did like a deep fake video where they tried to improve like the look of Leia in Rogue One, and they did
it with the mummy scene, which is one of my favorite videos of theirs.
And they actually did a better job, especially with the Rogue One.
Yes, they do a great job with the Rogue One. I think they did God's work to the mummy scene with The Rock, because obviously, we have to talk about that. Is that's one of the worst examples of them trying to be
really early too.
Really early, yeah. I feel like that was just too. It's like that movie's full of CGI bugs, and they were like, "We really got this bug thing down. What if we put a face on a bug?"
And
you're like, "No."
Those first two movies is that most of the time when they did weird effects like that, like it was like exaggerated and comical, just like
look, the storm. The storm works
exactly, or even stupider stuff where like he does it in the first film all the time, where like his jaw expands and drops for him to roar. Just like, well, that's sort of weird and uncomfortable. That's also meant to be weird and uncomfortable too, so it works. But it's just one of those things where like, wow, this is literally CGI. Rock centaur scorpion thing that's really odd. And then you can kind of point to other stuff where it almost sticks out as well. Like I would say It, because I think Centaur, and I think like It Chapter 2.
Yep, where they have to put his face on the giant crab creature. Yeah. And they do a decent job because, they go kind of cartoonish. They make his head balloon shaped, sort of, and I think that is helpful in being like, it's not human.
Chapter 2 got like a little too comfortable with its CGI.
Yeah, I
because I think of like the scene with like the old lady.
Oh yes, yeah, it gets weird.
Where it's like she's so CG and she's like naked and like gyrating and stuff to the point where it's no longer scary, it's just become comical.
Yeah.
Like it gets to that point where in that particular scene where I'm actually holding back a laugh, it's like, well, now we've just gone silly.
I mean, the same thing can be said about chapter ones. And I mean, but it's forgivable in chapter 1 because they're kids, and that's the whole problem with chapter 2 is that is you have the scenes where you have the nice makeup for the guy who's sick. They do a good job with that. They do, but then you have the woman in the painting, which is terrible.
Yeah.
They go cartoony and try to replicate the painting. And sure, it's scary, but it's weird looking, you know? Like, it's a good moment, but it's not there. And you're kind of like,
But what's a lot more awkward is them trying to de-age the kids in chapter 2.
Oh, yeah, that's strange.
Oh, man, because, like, the body proportions are all off, and you could tell that the heads are kind of pasted on, and every one of the kids' voices are also pitch shifted, so it's, like, really awkward.
It's really weird.
That whole scene in, like, their little cabin, like, underground is just, like...
You're a little taller, aren't you all?
Yeah. Like, and you could tell that you're trying to make it work, but when you see scenes of like them trying to ride their bikes and like their heads don't quite like fit, like it's clear that it's sort of like mapped on, but it's not. It doesn't look natural.
And the same could be said for. We were saying how great Gollum is, but then you have to bring up the travesties of not Lord of the Rings, but the Hobbit trilogy.
Gollum actually looks really good in the
Gollum
Hobbit.
looks really good in the Hobbit. I'm talking about the Hobbits, because they go from perfecting it in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, where they do it all practical. They make them step back. They make them be on their knees. They do it all like they in camera trick it. To where you go to Hobbit and they go, we're just gonna CGI you on the screen. Fuck it, you know, like and it just looks weird at times.
That whole scene with the barrels.
Yes, I was gonna say the barrel scene because, and I think it's a combo of that scene doesn't look good, and then that's the main draw of the 48 frames per second for the movie is like this barrel scene's gonna look so good, and then it looks like absolute garbage, and you're kind of like...
There's some weird choices in the Hobbit movies as well. I mean, the Hobbit movies could be their own discussion, but you have like really good makeup on each of the dwarves, but then you have like weird stuff like in Battle of the Five Armies with Billy Connolly being there, and he's like CGI for no reason.
Yeah, and you're kind of like, wait, why? Like, you could have just left him, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you're just like, okay. It's so sad because they go from being like, we could do this practically to being like, we could do this easy. You know,
I wonder what... I would like to take like a vacation into the alternate universe in which Guillermo del Toro actually directed the Hobbit movies like he was originally going to. Because I'm really curious.
I think we all want to be in that universe right now.
I'd like to be in a universe where Guillermo del Toro actually gets to finish projects that he starts.
And any of them. Justice League Dark,
Room
anything.
2, like the Lovecraft adaptations he was going to do. Just
anything.
Literally anything.
Just let my man finish a thing. Jesus Christ. Also, give that man a Star Wars film. Give him something.
Give that man a Star Wars film.
I mean, he would be fine in a Marvel movie, I'm sure, but give that man a Star Wars film. He would do something fucking weird with it, you know, like... I know we were trying to move away into video games, but you have to give it up to the crowning jewel of the Marvel Uncanny Valley is Thanos. You have...
Thanos is an interesting one.
He's really good.
Because he's one that's like shifted over time.
Oh, yes, of course.
If you look at every single appearance leading up to Infinity War, he changes a bit. He's very different in the stinger at the end of the Avengers.
Yes.
Then you go
because, of course, you just see his chin.
Yeah, mostly just you see him from the side. He looks very cartoony in that, but faithful.
Yeah.
But there was like the worry of like how much you can sustain that for an entire film. Then you move on to Guardians. That was the first time Josh Brolin had played them. Looks a little more realistic, but still very comic book. He had like the different colored eyes and stuff still. And the concern when the Infinity War trailers first came out, we've got that first glimpse of Thanos, is that there was sort of a radical redesign from between Guardians and that.
Where all of a sudden he's smaller almost.
Yeah, like the more alien eyes are gone. They're more humanistic. They sort of pale down the more purplish skin to make it a little more skin tone while still being kind of pinkish. And he's super expressive. And there was actually the concerns. I remember concerns of when that trailer first came out. I was like, oh, he looks weird. I don't think I like that. And my immediate thought was, that's going to be better off because I can already tell he's going to be much more expressive.
And I think you have to automatically go to the complete opposite of that is you have X-Men Apocalypse, where they just were like, yeah, we're just going to practically do this, and he's going to look terrible on screen. You know, like, and you're just like, wait, no.
Apocalypse is a lose-lose situation.
Yes.
Because even if you made him
terrible villain
with a stupid design, whether be it in the movies or the comics, so even if you made him as faceable as possible, he still would have looked stupid.
Still looked stupid. Like, there's just no way to make him look good.
Coming from the X-Men fan among us who grew up with X-Men, Apocalypse is stupid.
Apocalypse is stupid. I hate storylines for him because and I know this is a tangent, but I hate Apocalypse things because it's so stupid. It's in the name. He's like, I have to end the world. And guess what? He's never gonna end the world. Like, that's just never going to actually happen.
The most you'll get is, like, alternate reality stuff. Like, here's the age of Apocalypse, the alternate future where he did take over the world. Throw it in the pile with the other million, like, alternate futures in X-Men, because boy, does X-Men love to fuck with time.
Yeah, you're just
all
like,
the time.
And I just don't. That's why I hate them. It's the same reason why most people hate prequels. Is because you know what the fuck is about to happen. You know, like, you're just like, oh, is this person never going to die because they're obviously in these other movies? Oh no,
yeah, like, hard. It's hard.
But Josh Brolin gives a fantastic performance as Thanos in Infinity War and Endgame. I think those two rival Andy Serkis in his roles.
I mean, it helps that they were both Weta Digital.
Yeah, right? And that's really it. Yeah. I think you gotta give it to Andy Serkis. He's literally pushing the medium. Mm-hmm. He's literally being like, hey, Uncanny Valley, fuck you. Like,
and it's gotten to the point where I love how much it confuses, like, the Academy.
Yeah.
We're like, because people were pushing for, like, give Andy Serkis a Best Actor nomination for Gollum. Then they didn't do it. Then we got to the Apes movies, like, give it for them. So it's like, no. And then even with Josh Brolin as Thanos, and they're just like, but what do we do? Do we nominate the actor? It's more of a visual effect. I feel like the compromise is just the same way you do it for, like, producers or makeup and stuff, is that you just list multiple names.
Yeah.
Literally just go, and the nominees go to Andy Serkis / Weta Digital as
exactly.
Gollum. That's it. That's all you need to do.
That's all you need. And because you have to give credit where it's due. You can't just say that, oh, yes, Andy Serkis did that by himself. No, there's hundreds of artists at Weta that made that possible, you know? Like, and that's really it, is that they're all, like, concerned, but really give it to all those people, you know? Like, what's it going to hurt? You're going to make more money, the Academy, because everyone's going to have to buy more statues? Or the boo to who? Like,
but I do want to actually take it back to video games, because I feel like we've sort of brushed over it.
Yeah,
and I think it's a prevalent thing in the medium, especially as AAA games become more of a norm. And we actually do start to, like, bring in actual actors, and instead of having them voice a character, we start to take their likeness.
I think you have to bring up Call of Duty. I know you're not a big Call of Duty dude, but they are the kings of being like, who's the biggest actor right now? He is now our motion capture guy.
How much have they done? They've done John Bernthal. They've done Kevin Spacey.
They've done who's Jon Snow?
Kit Harington.
They've done. I know Carl Urban was one in one of them, and there's a lot of guys.
It's not unheard of for, like, big actors to do video games. You had stuff like Patrick Stewart in the Elder Scrolls games, and you had, like, Liam Neeson in Fallout 3, but they were usually voicing a character that had already pre-designed, but we're starting to do the thing more where we actually keep their likeness.
And I think the weirdest one, and of course it's even weirder with hindsight, is the Kevin Spacey one. Is like, because it's good. There's points where you're like, yeah, that's Kevin Spacey's fucking face on the screen, you know? Like, you're kind of like, that's pretty good.
Beforehand, it tended to be a little more experimental. Like, I think one of the big proponents of it, because they do it with every single game they produce, is Quantic Dream.
Yeah.
They're the company who made, like, Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls.
Yep.
It's like, it's a weird one. It's like Detroit Become Human.
Yeah, because those it's almost a performance. I mean, not almost a performance. It's a physical performance, because they are literally acting it out on
with
screen.
Heavy Rain, they literally cast people like you would for a movie, and they had them do all the motion capture. And then once they got to Beyond Two Souls, they really started to push it as if they were advertising the movies. Like, you guys don't get it. This is Beyond Two Souls.
This is a cinematic
starring
experience.
Ellen Page.
It's true, and that model's really well done.
Yeah.
I got to give it to them. There is that they do a good job with that, and they do a good job with. There's a lot of games where they do a good job with their faces, which is surprising because
you can go as far as like recently as like Death Stranding.
Yeah, but then you have to go back to the classics. You go to all the Star Wars games, and they all try to make Mark Hamill's face on models, and it's just like, how?
Don't get me started. I'm replaying Jedi Academy right now. I've been like switching back and forth between it and Celeste.
Yeah,
and just like seeing Mark Hamill's like face with like low poly. This was like back. It came out on PC and like original Xbox back in the day.
And you're just like, oh no.
And plus, it's also not Mark Hamill, nor is the actor even really trying to do a Mark Hamill impression, so it's more awkward.
It's even weirder.
Yeah.
You're just like, I would say the Star Wars games is definitely one of the biggest culprits of like trying to make the human actors in the game, and it just comes across as like, ooh, that doesn't look right. Like that's a little bit off. And then you have achievements that have still not come to us because of delays. You have Cyberpunk 2077. Is it 2079? I don't. Cyberpunk.
It's 2077. Like I keep mixing up the year too.
Right. I'm just like, which one is this one? But the Keanu Reeves model they have in those trailers, which we'll see when it's actually in game, but I've seen some of the footage. It looks real fucking good. Like real good, you know, like
that's also another conversation in and of itself. What looks real good now, who knows what it'll look like 10 years from now.
Exactly.
But I think that's inherent with any effects.
Yeah.
Be it like digital or even back with practical effects.
Yeah. Because like I was saying, the Kevin Spacey one is weird because at the time it was like, wow, that's so well done. And then you go back now and you're like, whoa, shit. Like, that is creepy looking, you know? Like,
not everything can be John Carpenter's thing with every effect holds up.
Yes, it just is a timeless classic.
Yeah.
But it's funny because the games they go for it often, you know? Like, and they're going for it more. Last of Us Part 2 coming out, there is almost completely acted out by the actual actors,
which is interesting because they're primarily voice actors, and this has been a thing going on since about last gen. Yeah, I would say with like PS3 and Xbox 360, where even if they were primarily voice actors, we started to bring them in.
I would say
for motion capture.
One of the big profile ones of that, and of course there's many different ones, was the first Force Unleashed, where they really were out there being like, look, we filmed him doing everything, and now we put it in the game.
They even use Sam Witwer's likeness for that. Like.
And they do a good job. It's weird looking now, but it's at the time it was really good looking.
Like games of that generation really started to push it because I think of how many games have done it. Uncharted did that.
Yeah,
the Infamous
I was gonna say Uncharted,
yeah.
Like because Uncharted's definitely the ones where they literally bring those actors in to act it out, and it's like, and they've gotten more and more beautiful. Like, and it's like I've never played those games, but I've sure watched the footage of that last game, and you're just like, hell. That's crazy. like that's crazy looking like game. It's just
Uncharted 4 still looks good, and even though it's already been like a few years since that came out, replaying it, I'm just like, this still looks incredible. And then the benefit is that it's actually not trying to capture the likenesses of the actors playing them. They're actually supposed to be just fully originally designed, and they still look pretty seamless, but still stylized enough for where you believe it. Yeah. And that's also an advantage that sometimes you can do. Sometimes being hyper stylized is more of an advantage. Like that brings back the argument of The Lion King, or even beyond that, keeping it to gaming, you can argue a game like Wind Waker.
Yes.
Where it's super stylized and cartoony, but that game still looks good.
It still looks good today.
Whereas, like, I know you're not a big fan of Twilight Princess, and one of the game's missteps is that they tried to go hyper-realistic, and the game's... And even a generation after, it already looked dated.
Which is funny, because now when you look at it, it doesn't look very realistic, you know? Like, it just looking back on it, you're kind of like,
yeah, that's why I said, even like a generation after it, it was like, this is already sticking out.
Right? Like, it's very, you look at Breath of the Wild, and it's like, it's hyper-realisticness. And
in a way, but it is also cel-shaded to hell, so they can hide the cracks.
Yes, they're like, whoop. it's okay. Don't
Yeah.
look at that. Like, and I think a lot of games do that nowadays. They can shell shade a lot of shit out, you know, like they're just like, nope, don't
Cell
look at that.
shading is a great like style choice, but it is also an easy way to hide your cracks.
Yes, I do love a good shell shaded game if it's really well made, of course. But I'm playing Borderlands right now, and they do a good job.
Borderlands is a good example of that. I think back to like the Ultimate Spider-Man game where it was trying to look like the Ultimate Spider-Man.
The early
comics.
Telltale games. They do a good job at making cartoony. I would say that's a great example. The Game of Thrones one does a great job of being like, this is the same actor, but cartoony. You know, like they're like, it looks more like a comic book version of them, man. And they do a good job. Like you see Cersei and you're like, that's Cersei. You know,
and
like,
they were going to do a similar approach back when they were going to do a Stranger Things game, where it's just like, the likeness is there, but we're making it a smidge comic-y.
which is funny because they go in the super cartoony way with the Back to the Future Telltale games.
I love that game.
They really go cartoony, and I think that the same thing could be said for their Guardians of the Galaxy one. Is they kind of go really cartoony just to hide all the everything.
And with the Guardians Telltale game, they're really trying to like emulate like elements of like MCU's version of the Guardians, but also keep it comic booky and kind of make it its own thing. They do sort of like
because they have the Gamora original suit, but
Yeah.
Peter Quill's wearing the suit from the movie, you know, like, and you're kind of like,
so they're trying to strike a balance. They tend to seem to want to do that with any like these straight comic book adaptations.
Yeah.
Even with The Wolf Among Us, which is supposed to be a prequel, but they also take advantage of the fact that it's a period piece that takes place in the 80s, so they're all about like they're all about making it like neo-noir and super neon pink and stuff like that. Love the style of that game.
And I think that you have to. I've been playing a lot of Witcher 3. It's funny because the varying degrees of Uncanny Valley in that game. Because I think, and of course I'm playing on Switch, so there's a little bit of a downgrade. But Geralt looks good constantly. Like every cutscene, flawless. He looks like, it's Geralt. Looks like Geralt from every angle. Like great. But then you can start some scenes with random citizens and their face is like a little bit to the side, and you're like, oh.
That kind of just comes with the territory when you're dealing with RPGs, especially like Western style RPGs. Like, believe me, everyone can fawn over Elder Scrolls all they want. You ain't playing Elder Scrolls for the graphics.
No, it's a weird looking game if you have to look at it, like you're like, yeah, that's weird.
And often, as far as animation is concerned, it's usually like a preset. For something just wah, just to get like the dialogue out of the way. Some games are able to do it where they're actually able to make it look a little more complex, even.
And you have to bring up Mass Effect. You got to bring up Mass Effect for that. Was
like one of those things where that was like the wrong way to do it, but that production also suffered issues of them like switching engines midway through.
It's funny too because I feel like Mass Effect, you have to give them props for pushing the entirety of the mocap genre, even though there's moments in all of their games where you're like, oh, that looks bad.
Andromeda really stuck out because they had like problems
oh my
with,
god,
like,
they look dead in the eyes, and like it's so wild. And that's most of the Uncanny problem I find is that sometimes it's just the dead eyes that get me, and not to get away from games, but one of the better versions of doing eyes well is our Boys in Blue, the Avatar movie, and the future Avatar movies, whatever the fuck you want to call it.
What are you talking about, Frank? What did I tell you? Those are imaginary movies.
I can still dream!
Those are imaginary movies.
They are. They're never going to happen.
You dreamt those.
No.
They're real.
It's still delayed from 2015. Because it really is what they do a great job of adding this cartoony, realistic alien creature and then still giving it human eyes that give the performance, and I give it to Avatar. It's hasn't aged as well as probably James Cameron would have loved, but it definitely for the time changed things.
But it is prevalent to bring up as far as like the innovation of motion capture is concerned.
Yes. Like, and I that's the problem with the delays is that I want to see what an updated James Cameron can do to these things.
I just want to see James Cameron direct a movie again.
Yes.
We brought this up already. Just like, I got to see like why he's just putting all his eggs in this basket.
Right? Why is it this basket?
And, now that we're done with the stereotypical just like Native American versus the military story, maybe we'll actually do something a little more innovative.
Nah, they're just going to steal the plot from Ferngully next time.
But they already did.
No, they're going to do it again. They're just like, round 2.
Throw a rock, Ferngully, Dances with Wolves, Pocahontas.
Yeah, that's what I always say, because they literally steal shots from Pocahontas.
I think the only time it's actually been done well is probably Dances with Wolves. Because Pocahontas isn't great. Ferngully's trash. So
What? What did you do?
Ferngully is trash.
How dare you?
Ferngully is
How dare
trash.
You? Okay, I haven't rewatched it in a long time. I was actually trying to
I
watch
bet
it
you
the other
will.
day.
I bet you haven't.
I tried to rewatch it the other day, and I couldn't find it anywhere on streaming. And I know it's on HBO Max now, so I'll have to get HBO Max.
Just fast forward all the Tim Curry stuff.
How dare you?
You'll have a great
How
experience.
fucking dare
just
you?
watch the Tim,
How
just
dare
watch
you
the
speak
Tim Curry.
bad of Ferngully?
Don't just watch the Tim Curry scenes in a compilation on YouTube and be done with it, Frank.
I didn't know you felt this way about Ferngully. I didn't know this.
I loved Ferngully as a kid too, Frank, and then I grew up.
Okay, now I really have to rewatch Ferngully.
You really don't. That's the point I'm trying to make, Frank. Watch RoboCop instead. RoboCop will solve all your problems.
Oh my god. Okay, where the fuck were we?
Back to games.
Back to games. Where the fuck? Where else do you want to go with the games? Because I've lost my train with it of thought.
What's interesting to me is that because I thought about the Arnold thing again, specifically for MK11, because it has Arnold's likeness but not his voice.
Yeah.
There's also a similar thing with Death Stranding because Guillermo del Toro is literally in Death Stranding, like his likeness is in there because him and Kojima are buddy after Silent Hills. Rest in peace, Silent Hills.
Rest in pieces.
But that's also a thing where he's not voicing himself.
Yeah.
Which I sort of get. It's not like Del Toro's an actor or anything, but it's weird.
And his accent can be hard to understand for some people, so I can see why he could be self-conscious of it. Because it sounded like he didn't want his voice in it, like he casted somebody else, like it wasn't like a choice thing.
It's an interesting choice, but I feel like you also lose a little something with the advantage of any form of voice acting, be it in gaming or animation or anywhere else. You have the advantage of you can play a character that you might not end up ever looking like. That's the advantage. You can kind of inhabit any sort of role.
True.
Even more so than you would be able to do for stage or film.
Yeah.
So the fact that...
I say the main guy who does that would be... and this is a bad example of Uncanny Valley, is the Christmas Carol with Jim Carrey. That is...
Oh, man. That's actually a good thing to bring up because, man, there was this whole phase that Robert Zemeckis had where he was, like, all about motion capture.
Motion capture. Yeah, I know. We haven't brought up the main guy, main boy, Polar Express over here.
He went through a whole ass phase with that. Polar Express, Mars Needs Moms, A Christmas Carol. Like, that was his thing for a bit.
And he was trying to push the Uncanny Valley like really hard. And I would say if Mars Needs Moms wasn't such a boring fucking movie, it really does push the Uncanny Valley in some interesting ways. They do. The kid looks good, like...
That was one of those things where I thought Polar Express looked really impressive like when I first saw it.
Really? I always thought Tom Hanks was weird. I always thought that was strange.
See, now we have the opposite. That's how I felt about Tron Legacy.
Yeah, because I just...
Like, you bought it for that, I did it, and now we're on the opposite side.
Because I first off, as a kid, I loved the book Polar Express. In New Hampshire, they have a replica Polar Express. You go on it as a kid. They give you hot chocolate. They read the Polar Express. You get a bell. It's awesome. You meet Santa at the end. It's one of the reasons why I love it. And then that movie comes out, and I'm like, man, I can't wait to see Polar Express. And this is, I'm saying, but this is now 15-year-old Frank, and I go and see it, and I'm just like, fuck this movie. It's just like the whole movie is so weird
this
looking.
Ain't no fucking Jumanji.
Jumanji.
I only bring that up because they're the same author. That's literally it. That's like the only comparison, and the idea of like taking a really short like picture children's book and turning it into a full length film.
And that's my main problem with Polar Express is that a 20-page book, and they're just like, let's try to go.
So was Jumanji.
And I mean, and so is Where the Wild Things.
Yeah.
And that goes in a weird fucking direction,
that one gets real abstract and existential.
That one gets
that one's an
too adult. Like, that one gets like, let's think about death. And you're like, whoa.
Sit down, kids.
I feel bad for every parent who walked in with their kids to Where the Wild Things Are and being like, man, I love Where the Wild Things Are. And then we're like, what
they were
the fuck?
thrown into an existential quandary.
On the ride home, they're like, Mom, is it okay to be angry at anybody?
It's just like, why is my kid a philosopher?
You're just like, no.
Where the Wild Things Are, the ultimate philosopher majors PSA.
They do a good job of CGI in Where the Wild Things Are, though. Yeah. You give it to them there. They do where the wild things are extremely well done because there's a mix of puppetry and I think that's one of the main things we have to give here is you were saying there was multiple layers to
Sean Young and Blade Runner?
Yes, and then you have to talk about the many layers that go into so many of these, and some of them, I feel like they just kind of wing it with Polar Express. They were like, we got Tom Hanks done.
That's all we needed.
It's all we needed. But then you look at things like Baby Yoda, which I know that's a weird thing to bring up at this moment, but Baby Yoda is one of the best examples of a mix of puppetry and CGI working flawlessly. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you of course have to point at the prequels being they couldn't decide if they wanted to puppet or CGI. And then if you watch the Disney Plus versions, it's all CGI. They fucking replaced the puppet.
It's not just... That's actually started in the Blu-rays before they put it on Disney Plus.
Oh man, it made me so angry when I was rewatching it for Star Wars
Day. The puppet in the Phantom Menace is not a great puppet. It looks really weird.
It looks strange, but this is not better. It doesn't make me happier.
And I sort of get the conceit of just he was completely CG in episode 2 and 3, so why not make that look a little more consistent? So I get it, but it's still just come on, stop trying to stop enough with this revisionist history bullshit.
Go back to the original episode of Warp Shelf. Revisionist history bullshit.
It just keeps on going. I mean, if George is even going to change the prequels, they're perfect. They were perfect from beginning to end. I don't need to change anything. So if he's even changing things for Phantom Menace, oh man, that just opens up the door.
I know, right? He can just do whatever. But Baby Yoda is so well done in that. When he's in the sack, it's obviously a puppet, and when he's moving around, it's CGI. But they mix the two extremely well, and I think it plays. He looks good, he looks cute. There's a reason why Baby Yoda took off the way he did, is because it works.
And oftentimes, a philosophy like that actually works better, where you don't try to go all in one direction, where the limitations actually help. You look at something like Lord of the Rings. And you're just they were using every trick in the book.
Yeah, seriously. They were like, quack, let's do everything.
So we're going to do everything. We're going to use CGI to shrink the hobbits. Sometimes we're going to use forced perspective. Sometimes we're going to use practical makeup. We're going to use body doubles.
Yeah. It's wild. And I give it to him there because, I mean, obviously, I think the Lord of the Rings trilogy is magic. They somehow pulled off a almost perfect trilogy, and that's something that barely ever happens, and with a cast that great, it just doesn't seem possible, especially for an adaptation of something.
But something like The Mandalorian sort of has that similar philosophy, and it helps that it is a TV show, so it is limited by constraints more so than you would for the movies.
A little bit of a budget.
So that's also something where they're kind of throwing a lot of stuff. So here's a puppet, here's animatronics, here's actual CGI, here's the rear projection technology. Yeah, the rear projection technology. So dope.
Dope. Love it. So cool. And that's a different one, because that's Uncanny Valley of not people, but backgrounds, environments. And sure, we've had green screen forever, but this is different. This is we are trying to fake the camera into thinking this is a real background,
which is weird because it's just a modern take on a really old school technique.
Yeah, really, 1930s. Yes, now the screen will move. And it really, and that's what it is. And it works so well. There's so many scenes in Mandalorian where I'm I can't tell if that's real or not. this is like questionable, you know? Like, and I mean, the same thing could be said for Lion King. I got to give it to Jon Favreau. The environments are incredible. Just like, sure, you messed up the animals because you tried to go too realistic, but if what he says is true, that the opening shot is the only real non-CGI shot in the film, that's incredible.
I do admire the balls of just like the only thing that's live action is the opening shot.
And that's what it is. It's ballsy.
Just as a reference point to how realistic the rest of the film looks, and you didn't even notice.
Right? Like, that's what's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And it's funny. It's almost hubris, you know, like absolute power. I can make anything. And then they're like, whoops, fucked it up. Like, you know, like, too far. Like, too far. And I think that's a couple lessons from all of this talk is it's okay to be a little cartoony. You don't, I think there's a huge difference between, Topher Grace Venom versus Tom Hardy Venom when they pop out of the suits together, because they try to do the same effect. They try to do the Iron Man shield face, but then you do it on Topher Grace, right? I'm saying Topher Grace. I'm like that 70s show. Like it just looks bad. It looks like they copy and pasted his face onto something. Yeah, and then the Tom Hardy. It's better.
That and literally no one liked Topher Grace as Eddie Brock, so every time you pulled back the face, you're just like, no, just give me the CGI.
Yeah,
monster.
Just give me the Venom.
That's what I came here for.
Just give me Venom. Like, he's a fine voice. He was. He is. I just don't like when you're like, that's supposed to be Eddie Brock, everybody. You're just like, you're like, what? Like, no. That's why Tom Hardy works, is that's like more like it.
2 points I will give Spider-Man 3. Is that it's very well technically made for the most part, because it's still Sam Raimi. There's the scene where the Sandman tries to pull himself together and reform his body as he's trying to grab the locket. That's a great scene.
Cool looking.
And then there's a scene in the church where like Eddie actually becomes Venom, because that's pretty beat for beat the comic. And
I remember having a half chub the entire scene.
Just like,
I was
man, you just replaced this with a much better choice for Eddie Brock. It was perfect.
This would have worked. Except not really at all. None of that movie really works.
In a bubble.
In a bubble, it would have worked. So that's an important lesson, is that there's copy and pasting a face, and then there's making it work for the scene, you know, like, and that's what I think a lot of these artists are finding out, and I think it shows in Mandalorian, is that if we work with the actual light of the scene, we can fake pretty much all of it, you know, like almost everything, you know, like, and you wouldn't even know. Yeah. Which is, first off, for a guy who has worked in film and television and ads and video, that's so exciting, you know? Like, first off, green screen's exciting because you can make yourself go anywhere. But this is like a step further more exciting because it makes it even more seamless. It makes it even more like, let's go anywhere we fucking want, you know? Like, and do this anytime, anywhere, you know? I love it. Love it.
It's part of the reason they were able to finish filming Mando season 2.
Yeah, which is crazy too, you know, like you're like, oh, everybody else can't film, and Disney's like, yeah, fuck that. Like,
we'll just go to a warehouse, we'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm sure they were just like, go to Disney Island and we'll film it. Like, and you're just like, what? Disney Island?
What else is there?
Yeah, they probably filmed it at like Disney Springs, being like, no one's here anyways. Like,
we have the room.
We have the room. Would that be nice if Disney actually filmed on their lots like they used to?
It doesn't matter. Mando's in a mask all the time anyway. It's safe.
It's safe.
Everyone else has got like helmets on, or there's some alien creature with makeup and prosthetics, so they're all safe. It's fine.
We can all mask up. Everyone's stormtrooping. Like, it'll be totally fine.
Everyone is stormtrooping. Petition to turn stormtrooping into an official verb.
It's done. I've made it possible because I am the Senate. But I think that de-aging's a huge... The reason why we spent most of this episode on de-aging is because it's a direct uncanny valley. Yeah. You know, like, you can directly be like, this is what they looked like when they were young, this is when they look like when they're old, and this is what they look like in the movie. Whoops. You know, like, and I'm not saying doing makeup for de-aging is flawless. sometimes it can just not look good. And then other times you have Steve Rogers at the end of Endgame where you're like, hey, that's freaking old Steve Rogers, you know, like instead of the young Steve Rogers that they tried to do in Captain America 1. And you're just like, why did they put his body on that toothpick there?
They show like small Steve in like one little flashback in Winter Soldier, and it already
looks so much better.
Much better there.
I know, that made me so angry. I mean, it's nice. It makes it's the brothers, the Russo brothers, being like, oh, we didn't direct that movie, but look, we just did it real well. Oh, just did your entire movie better than you. Oh, like. You're just like, hey, like, and I mean, Russo brothers have been flexing on him ever since. Have just been like, yeah, okay, we can do this crazy CGI. It's fine. Like, I mean, you give it to Endgame. That entire last sequence is a big CGI fight. And usually when a CGI fight starts, I hate it. You know, like, you're like, oh, good. Am I going to watch a bunch of nice CGI graphics happen for the next half an hour instead of real actors? Cool. Thanks for that. Like, you know, like, and I mean, there's great movies that are culprits of that. Like, I love the ending of Far From Home. I really love that ending, but that is strictly just like let's do a CGI showcase, you know, for half an hour, which it looks good. It looks real good.
Yeah, it does. And it's one of those things where, like, Spider-Man's a tough one because you can only really do that in CG, given, like, the motions and the acrobatics and stuff like that.
Which is, I would say, Spider-Man's the main culprit of the end CGI fight, which of being like, aha, then now they have to fight each other, which Marvel often falls into that problem of being like almost every one of the Marvel films, at least one of every one of the series ends with some CGI fight. The only ones are the Captain America ones where they're not like beating the shit out of each other. That CGI, like, because Hulk,
Spider-Man 1 starts with the bridge, so there's a lot of CGI there.
Yeah,
but when they end the fight in the warehouse, that's mostly practical.
Which you got to give it to Sam Raimi. Yeah. He wanted to. You can tell he wanted to do it all.
But then you get to stuff like 2, and like that whole train sequence is mostly CGI, even though that fight is dope as hell.
You got Iron Man. That ends. All those end with a CGI fight, which are like cool, I guess. Like this is fun. Is this fun for you? This is not fun for you. I would say that the biggest culprit of it shouldn't have been a CGI fight, and then of course it was Captain Marvel. Like, I think that they could have done some cool, non-completely CGI fight, and they were like, nah.
I remember the final fight in
Exactly.
Captain Marvel.
Exactly. Who gives a fuck? That's the problem. That movie is pretty much forgettable.
Oh yeah, that's another de-aged one that has the same problem as The Irishman. Like de-aged Samuel Jackson looks pretty good. And then you see him run.
Yeah. Oh, like that don't look right.
Or like throwing punches, and you're like, ugh.
And I mean, how do you fight the actual performance? You know, like, and that's the problem with this Valley. You go from being like, oh, we can just change it up, like Tintin, where they're like, it's completely CGI, so it doesn't fucking matter.
That's
an
interesting one.
You know, like, so it's like, we can make this cartoonish looking and it won't change. Like, we can actually change the performance movement of people and it won't matter, you know, like, but then you're restricted with other ones, you know, like, you're just like, that's how Samuel L. Jackson actually moves, so
ain't that a shame?
Ain't that a shame?
We can't de-age them for
real.
Not yet.
I know, not yet. Disney's like, we're working on de-aging Samuel L. Jackson. We're just gonna make him live forever. What do you guys think? And Samuel L. Jackson's like, motherfucker. Like, because I mean, if anybody needs to be kept around to keep the current MCU going, it's probably Samuel L. Jackson.
I think the first time I noticed like Sam Jackson like really starting to get up there as far as the context of the MCU is concerned was probably Age of Ultron.
Where you were like, whoa.
Where he's like wearing a turtleneck and you're just like, wow, Sam Jackson's really getting up there. Because I compared this to even like the Stinger and like the first Iron Man. Just like, he's still got it.
He's still got it.
Yeah.
That one's such a, you're just like, oh, okay. Like, I think that, I think that there's a lot to look at with the Uncanny Valley, because there's movies like Tintin, and then you compare them to Polar Express, where they're pretty much similar styles and look, and somehow Tintin's like 10 times better than the animation in Polar Express.
I think it definitely helps that Tintin is more stylized than the Polar Express one. They are both stylized.
And it's a different one. It's more of a live action mocapping. Like they actually film it and do the graphics at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, like they do with a lot of the Toy Story stuff, and it's just wild. Like, you know, like it's just crazy looking. You know, like and that shows in the way that the whole thing plays out. You're just like, damn, that's beautiful.
There are just multiple ways to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have anything else you want to cover?
I think we've kind of covered all the bases.
Covered all the bases. Guys, if you have any egregious examples of Uncanny Valley, let us know. Our Twitters are YepFrank and...
Correct.
And we also have a Facebook page that you should check out and, tell us which ones you thought were better. If you were like, hey, Robert Downey Jr. young version looked really fucking good.
It was pretty good.
And you're like, you got me there, you son of a bitch.
It was pretty good.
But that's pretty much it.
The same could not be said for Clark Gregg.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actual plastic.
Yeah, you're like, meh. You're like, that's not so
That
good.
gave me flashbacks to X-Men 3.
And I don't think we talked before we close out. I think we have to talk about one of the worst Uncanny Valleys, where they reached for the stars and they fell burning to the ground. Beowulf.
Beowulf. Oh yeah, that was a thing.
That's a thing. Oh my God, does that movie still look bad? It looked bad at the time, and then now it still looks bad.
Shit, was that another Robert Zemeckis one?
Yes.
Damn.
Yes, we forgot.
He really just went through a phase.
He did. He really did. He was like, I don't need actors.
Oh, God. It was like when he finally directed Flight, you're just like, oh, thank God.
And so, which is really funny because Polar Express had a bigger budget than Beowulf. Like they're saying
the
here,
one based on the
$165 million to
the one based on the
$150
short
million.
20-page children's book got more of a budget than like the high fantasy one.
Yeah, it's just
I don't know, man.
Oh my goodness, that's one of those movies where so he didn't even like learn anything from Polar Express. He just went more realistic, and it just blew up in his face. You know, like that. That's one of those movies where you're like, wow, that looks realistically wrong. You know, like it's the uncanny effect where you're like, well, that looks realistic. No, it doesn't.
You want to talk about dead eyes? Every single one of those have dead eyes.
Every single one. Everybody.
Yeah.
You're just like, geez. Especially Angelina Jolie's character. You're just like, yeeks. You're just like, that looks weird. You know, like, you're just like, that's just very strange.
Yeah.
But sorry, I had to bring up Beowulf because before we ended, because it is the main culprit of reaching for the basically being Prometheus, reaching for the fire and then got burning down to the ground.
That's Icarus.
Icarus, damn it!
Prometheus was the one who brought fire to the mortals.
Yes.
And was punished by the gods.
Yes. Yes, and Icarus flies up.
Yeah. Icarus is the one with the wax wings.
Both. Stealing fire from the gods.
Hey, look, man, it's both Greek and all. Same thing, pretty much.
It's all Greek to me.
Yeah.
But thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And please reach out and speak to us about this stuff. We'd love to talk to you. And please like, subscribe, whatever you're going to do.
However it's done based on what platform
whatever
you're on.
platform, because we're on everything. It would be very helpful because it keeps the show going. So, guys, thank you, and have a great week.
See you next time.